Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast for a very different stage of the Tour de France. I feel like we haven't had one of these for a week, and that is correct. We have not. We have finally have a flat stage. The peloton, I think, will be happy to see it too. From Moutier to Bourg-en-Bresse, 185 kilometers, pretty warm conditions, 2 Category 4 climbs, 1.6 Ks, 4%. The last of one is 2.6 Ks, 5%, 80 Ks from the finish. And the finish is a little uphill kicker, but nothing like not like the Limoges finish at all. It's just a little uphill kick that maybe Pedersen gets and Philipsen get a bit of an advantage from it against Groenewegen, but it's a sprint stage. But we have a very tired peloton bench. We've just had 5 GC days in a row. We just had a 5,000 meter Courchevel Col de la Loze stage yesterday. And we've got Alpecin here with Jasper Philipsen, who's won 4 of the 5 sprints, and the one he lost was a proper uphill drag in Limoges to Pedersen. I thought, and once again, I feel like, and someone said on Twitter, this is like the flat earther thing last year. Every breakaway formation, I feel the same way. I'm like, we're going to see 10 teams fight for it, and then 3 teams go in the break, and every day I'm just confused anew.
Yeah, exactly, and you would say, yes, in some of these stages, there were actually like in-depth breakaway formation phases where Alpecin controlled, but in the majority, the break went off. Some of them even returned to the peloton because they didn't want to be in a small breakaway in the first place. So in most of these stages, the breakaway formation wasn't that captivating or fascinating either. So riders just went if they wanted to be in the breakaway. So today, 3 riders in the breakaway, Kampenaerts, Asgreen, and Abrahamsen. Once again, you've said it numerous times. I'll take your take and repeat it so that you don't have to repeat it for the 17th rant in a row. Yes, a team like DSM, for example, a team like Jayco has Groenewegen, which has somewhat of a chance to win, but I'd still say probably try to go in the breakaway to put pressure on Alpecin because Alpecin's basically destroying everybody else in the sprints these days. And all these teams don't go in the breakaway. And we see that the 3 teams that go in the breakaway, or Asgreen with Kampenaerts is teams that lost their sprinter, basically.
They're forced to. They have been forced to go on the break.
Exactly. And Abrahamsen, that's a different situation. That's
UNOX have finally changed.
Exactly. They've transformed. They've blossomed in something beautiful. And that's a 3-man breakaway. And behind we see the chase, DSM, Alpecin, and Jayco. And if you're not putting anyone in the breakaway, at least force Alpecin to chase down the breakaway. Otherwise, you're letting them stay strong.
But here's the problem with that. Now we're so deep into the race and Alpecin have won so many stages, they will play the game theory game of chicken and say, we just will not chase because we've won 4 stages. Fuck you. You chase because you haven't won a stage. Have Jayco won a stage or DSM? So that's Alpecin will play on that. They will not chase on their own. And so the obvious end game solution of this is Israel, Hugo Hull, Guillaume Bovin if he's here. This is your breakaway. Bora Hansgrohe, Niels Pollitt, this is your breakaway day. Magnus Cort, don't know what stage he's waiting for, maybe tomorrow. Intermarché with Turnisse. DSM with Niels Eckhoff, who is very good on this sort of finish. By the way, if one man goes in the breakaway, I've said this a million times, he doesn't have a vampire-like power where he saps the energy from your own sprinter. If they so happen to be caught, your sprinter can still sprint, as we saw with Christoph today. So, listen, Matt Winston, the DS of DSM, said on Twitter, if we don't try, we don't know. That is true once the break is gone. But it looked like their plan was never to put anyone in the break. And it's what I said yesterday. It's like they cannot go to their sprinter who's just made it over Col de la Loze and say, we don't believe you can beat Jasper tomorrow putting a guy in the break. Now, I think you should be able to have that conversation and say, listen, we think our best chance of winning is to make them use Van der Poel with 3Ks to go and Jonas Rickert with 5Ks to go. So Philipsen has nobody. But anyway, we get 3 in the break. I was annoyed. And anything else happened before the they kept it really tight though, Benji. I think that was almost a mistake. They kept it at like 45 seconds or a minute. Alpecin were clearly still concerned about the 3-man breakaway.
Yeah, they were pretty concerned, and also because we were hitting towards a hill with roughly 80 kilometers to go. The gap was 45 seconds, you said it. They kept it relatively close, and if you keep it relatively close with a hill upcoming, that means that some riders will be like, might as well jump to the breakaway. We saw multiple riders actually do that, but eventually it was a single man that caused a massive uproar. Pascal Eenkhoorn, ex-Dutch champion, lotto rider, he basically tries to slip on the right side of the peloton, past Alpecin that is trying to block the road on this hill to make sure nobody can bridge to the breakaway. He does that and jumps back on the road just before he hits a blue car, so he got kind of lucky there. He hinders Alpecin a tiny bit. We have to mention that. He hinders that Alpecin domestique a tiny bit. That needs to get out of the way a tiny bit. But the overreaction that follows by Jasper Philipsen is outrageous. He sprints to Eenkhoorn. He maneuvers past him. Then he kind of like half chops in front of him. Then he moves to the right again. And meanwhile, he's talking to Eenkhoorn. You can guess what he's saying at that point. He's clearly trying to bully Eenkhoorn into not bridging to the breakaway, right?
Yeah, he should be fined for and dock some points for intimidation. He's clearly trying to intimidate Eenkhoorn, both through his actions and, if Eenkhoorn tells the commissaires what he said to him, I assume it wasn't something that friendly. So, pathetic. Pathetic from Philipsen. You've basically mathematically won green. You've won 4 stages. You're already blocking the whole road on the climb because you can't control a 3-man breakaway. And you're basically trying to bully a guy on a team that hasn't won a stage, is a pro Conti team now trying to do their best. And you guys have kept the gap too close, which is why he's trying to bridge to the breakaway. It's your own fault. Pathetic. And Alpecin have acted, they're trained and Philipsen like dicks for a lot of the race, and they've not been penalized for it at all throughout the race. That's fine, whatever. But then you get behavior like this, and it's a little bit too much for me. I didn't like it. So,
it's
because you're entitled to block the road and ride in a straight line. You're entitled also. He can chase down Eenkhoorn and sit on his wheel. Yeah. I also don't have any problem with that. You're just sitting on his wheel. That's a legitimate cycling tactic, whatever. But to actually try to close him off is loser behavior. So anyway, Eenkhoorn gets across the breakaway. Do you reckon he'll get fined for it? Eenkhoorn would have to complain, I think.
I expect a fine. I don't expect more than a fine, as in the rules allow them to disqualify Philipsen even if they want. But they won't disqualify him, nor do I feel like it's harsh enough in that singular moment to disqualify him. If we look at the entire Tour de France, if there was a card system, Philipsen might actually be close. If he might have had 3 yellow cards. He'd be gone. Yeah.
And if the whole team, like if one guy if the cards counted for other people in the team,
that's a very difficult system to follow, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're right. Eenkhoorn bridged to the breakaway, but not entirely. He kind of got very close. Then Kampenaerts waited from the first 3 and bridged the last gap with him, which I like that. I enjoyed seeing that. It's something else. Doesn't happen often. There's a risk to it. If Kampenaerts drops and they both can't get to the breakaway anymore and they just patat there, then you lost both of them. But they clearly knew what they were doing and they got to the breakaway, and maybe they lost 5 seconds in the breakaway, but they gained a rider that could work from that point onwards after a bit of recovery. But a gap time, 60k to go, 40 seconds. Controllable, right? Plenty of teams still chasing, still the same ones as at the start. 30k to go, a minute. So the gap went up in the last 30k. Broe joining the chase. And that's when we start actively seeing teams joining the chase. We see 5 kilometers later, gap goes down to 55 seconds. 20 kilometers to go, 48 seconds. Jayco keeps adding riders. And then a legend comes to the front. The most legendary actions of Julien Alaphilippe in this Tour de France, and maybe in his life, were in the last 20 kilometers in the stage. You can explain.
Oh my God. And listen, this won't earn you many friends either, what he did.
Yeah.
I do not consider this to be dirty. He's not endangering anybody.
Correct.
He gets in the middle of, so there's a rotation, right? So all the teams, and this is why the breakaway was so smart, because they really started to drive it later with Kampenaerts. I think, Eenkhoorn was there, the Lotto sprint option. The break maybe was playing a little bit and they start to speed up. The other sprint teams are trying to keep guys, they don't want to put as many resources to the front as possible. So they all have one guy there from DSM, Trek, Bora, and Co. And Alaphilippe infiltrates this group and rotation. And they shouldn't be letting him infiltrate it, but he infiltrated it because he's a great bike handler. And maybe they forgot that he had Asgreen up the road. And then he gets to the front. Conrad, say, for example, flicks the guy behind him to pull through. It's Alaphilippe. And he just pedals at 200 watts. The breakaway gains. the breakaway gains over a second every time that happens. Over a second.
The best part was when Skjelmos was at the front. This is like the last 10 kilometers. Søren Kragh Andersen, Skjelmos had been doing some work together, basically. They were getting desperate at that point. The gap was roughly 25 seconds. And Søren Kragh Andersen goes out the front. Skjelmos is there. And Philipsen in the wheel of Skjelmos, like looking over his shoulder. And I'm like, shit's about to go down. Skjelmos goes out the front. He looks to the left. Alaphilippe looks to the right. They stare each other in the eyes. And that's a moment that I laughed so hard when I saw that. And Skjelmos went back on the front.
And de Klerk was doing it. De Klerk could only do it about one time, and he's like, "Oh, I'm done." Probably he didn't like getting shouted at by Alpecin because I think he's a really nice guy. But it was great.
Not just that Alaphilippe do like the subtle blocking in that sense. He was also like talking to people in the trains.
Yeah.
It's like it was trash talking them in the sense of like
he was on the radio saying they're done, Casper, for sure. He said it afterwards. He was like pepping up, being like, they got one guy left, and I knew. So when the gap comes down to 25, you're like, oh, breakaway's no good. But then you're like, Conrad's been pulling for 10Ks. Søren Kragh's been pulling for 10Ks. Trek are nowhere all of a sudden. Jaco have decided to stop pulling. Mistake. Yeah. And Conrad and Søren Kragh gap goes from 19 to 25 again. I'm like, you can't. This is the problem. All the sprint teams want to try conserve their train. And then Alpecin are suddenly like, oh, shit. Got to put guys together. Bora put Pollitt. Now, Pollitt really destroyed this gap. And I was like, oh, he might have been good from the breakaway. Has he won a stage like this in the Tour de France before? I'd be curious to know.
Tomorrow,
he's got. Yeah, I get that. I thought tomorrow he probably will go on the breakaway. But anyway, he starts pulling. He shreds the gap. Vingegaard's there. Second wheel. Van Baarle's in front of him with Benoit. They're not going to pull to catch the breakaway. Now, I was talking to Luke, like, does Vingegaard really need to ride for the 3Ks? Wouldn't the safest thing to actually increase, because the only way he loses the Tour is he crashes, right? Yeah, he should ride 1 minute behind the peloton each day, today and tomorrow, with just 3 guys side by side in the last 20Ks. He should.
Probably.
I'm being serious.
I think he's also thinking, I want to beat this Nibali gap historically.
Possibly. Maybe he thinks Pogacar will attack him. Anyway, Pollitt rips it to 10 seconds, but now, beautiful stuff. France TV say, we want a breakaway win today. And listen, I know the motorbikes are a problem. And if the motorbikes made a rider I didn't like win, I'd complain about it being unsporting. But today the motorbikes went in front of the breakaway and they had 2 motorbikes behind them. Peloton had no motorbike. I was like, they're not catching them. It was the Benjamin Thomas situation of last year. Beautiful moto action in front of Kasper Asgreen. And it's all a mess behind. I can't really definitively say exactly what was going on from 3Ks to 1K to go. I know Jaco moved up.
I can.
Oh, you can? Oh, then you're best place to do so.
So basically, Pollitt was still doing the lead out, and he brought it down to 10 seconds, to 9 seconds, to 8 seconds. And then we see at 800 meters to go, the switch in the front of the race. And that's when Alpecin moves up and Alpecin moves to the front. So Alpecin basically with 2 guys in front of Philipsen from that point onwards, which is Ricard and Van der Poel. With 800 meters to go, and let's be honest, the gap was large enough with 700, 600 meters to go where I was like, I'm confident the breakaway wins, especially because of that master pull by Victor Kampenaerts, because that was insane.
Yeah, it was like Kampenaerts just laid it all on the line for Encorn, and of course, that does mean that Asgreen gets to benefit from that, but that's life. Asgreen's also worked hard, that's life, Yeah. And listen, Lotto are not going to get a better result than the worst they can get is third.
Yep.
The worst they can get is third, and they're not going to get a top 3 on this stage from the peloton today. So, they did what they had to do. Kampenaerts outstanding. Jaco, I don't know why Bahrain started riding. I think it was for Nicky Assant. I think so. Astana were going for Bol, who did end up coming 6th. But yeah, the breakaway, they work seamlessly. They only start finessing, not really because they were carrying a lot of speed.
Mm-hmm.
So they were still going at 50, about 450 to go. And they did have the margin because the sprint teams were gone. They're tired. Asgreen opens it up early. This reminded me of his RVV 2021 sprint.
Yeah.
Early, strong sprint after a hard day on a little uphill. And he just kept sprinting. Because I think Encorn did a good sprint in his wheel, but Asgreen just never sat down. And he keeps the Wolfpack's streak alive, saving somewhat their Tour de France ahead of Encorn, a valiant second. And exciting for Encorn, stick it to Philipsen, who tried to bully him out of bridging across. He comes second on the stage. Abrahamsen third. Philipsen leads the peloton over for fourth, not catching the breakaway. Pedersen fifth, Bol sixth, Mayers seventh, Trentin eighth, and Laporte ninth. So the two GC teams, they let those guys have a crack today. Monsanto 10th, Christoph 11th. So, look at X.
Yep.
Yeah, Christoph would have ended up coming 8th, but now they got a 3rd and an 11th. I'll take that. De Bois 12th, Strong 13th. And, Groenewegen 17th. Was it not worth putting Durbridge or Mezgec in the breakaway, do you reckon? 17th,
I think it would have been worth it. I think every
19th.
team except Alpecin should have done it.
DSM, Sam, 20th.
Yeah.
And I know you're saying, well, you don't try if you don't know. Okay, we know
That's
now.
Bullshit.
We know, we've had many sprints now. We know.
Yeah.
Binny can't do it right now.
The thing with this sprint as well is Philipsen, I do want to say when it comes to the stage, Philipsen as a sprinter, best sprinter in the world, but it sucks so much that it's overshadowed by their behavior, right? And it kind of feels good that the breakaway won ahead of Philipsen after that.
Yeah, of course. everyone was, you check the pulse of Twitter, which, is a risky thing to do. I try not to do it too often, but for once I was in agreement with it. It seemed like everybody wanted the breakaway to win, and it is fantastic to see a break like this win. It only happened in the Giro with DeMarchi and Clark.
Imagine if Acorn won after that.
That's what I really wanted, but I was also happy for Asgreen to win.
Yeah.
Or Abrahamsen, I didn't, but yeah, Acorn winning would have been really, really poetic, but it still was poetic somewhat. I mean, Philipsen still has 4 stages, so it's not like he's short of Tour de France stage wins, but yeah, I enjoy the finish to this.
This is why Campenaerts deserved his Belgian World Championships spot, because this guy has actually been really fucking good this Tour de France. He's been in breakaways, he's been pacing all the time, and that's the kind of stuff the Belgian team needs in Glasgow as well from him. He needs to be there to help out. He's obviously not a leader, so I enjoyed seeing that today as well. And Asgreen, it's good that it paid off for tomorrow as well, because we've spoken about tomorrow a little bit. We'll go into the profile in a second, but today must show to all these teams that have fucked up once again today by not being in the breakaway that tomorrow they should, right?
Oh my God, come on. If it's not obvious to, I mean, it was already obvious, but if it's not obvious to you now, Alpecin can't control, I don't know. They can't control an urban cavoodle in Kensington, London, that basically will do whatever you say. Yeah, they can't even control that at the breakaway. So they have to, put him under a little bit of pressure. Also, Philipsen's just too good. As much as he maybe lost himself a couple of fans today, he still cleaned up the sprint. Yeah, behind. He cleaned everybody up, and I don't expect that to change. So yeah, but I'm happy for Lotto and happy for Quickstep, especially as they've had a very very challenging tour, and I think Alaphilippe's actually a really good teammate. That's why I always took issue with Lefebvre criticizing him after he was good for Remco in the Vuelta. Anyway, tomorrow's stage from Morat en Montagne to Poligny, it is 173 Ks. It's lumpy. One category 4, 2K, 6% in the first 20 Ks, and just lumpy, uncategorized climbs all day, big ring stuff. And then the Côte d'Ivory, that's how it's pronounced. Learn French, 2.3 Ks, 6.2%, 30 Ks from the finish for a descent. And then the run. I don't know who's going to win this stage. I think a breakaway goes. Has Magnus Cort been saving his bullets for this stage a la Wout Poels in the the mountain stage?
I don't trust Magnus Cort at all this Tour de France, because this guy has been invisible for me the entire time. So
but that was him during the Giro too.
I kind of feel like he doesn't have it at the moment. I'm worried about him in that sense. I'm more leaning towards maybe in Israel, few riders that will go in the breakaway. I bet Corbin Strong will try and go in the breakaway. Nylans will try and go in the breakaway. That kind of duo. Maybe Hugo Ull will go in the breakaway. Simon Clark. 2 of those 4 riders I think will be in the break. Jayco should have some riders in the breakaway, but who? That's a good question. Craddock, maybe Alma Reinders for once, because the dude's an engine. He just has to live in the train all the time. And there's so many riders on all these teams, and Lotto will try again, right? Kampenarts will try again tomorrow, I bet you. Acorn will try again tomorrow. Maybe injured Maxim van Gils will try and get in the breakaway. But
Aaron Broe.
Yeah, there's so many teams that will try and go in this breakaway, and I don't know. I kind of want to lean towards Corbin Strong because he's a nice guy, and that's the only reason. But you need a guy with an engine.
I think a big break's going to form, but you know, I mean, if Stefan Kung doesn't get in the break tomorrow, then I'm sorry. Like, what is this Tour de France? He left the Giro early when there were good break stages for him afterwards.
And now
there's going to be some hitters in the break tomorrow. I think Moritz wins, or Fred Wright. I think Bahrain, they've won 2 stages. They know how to win stages from the breakaway. I think that 2.3K, 6.2% climb is, it's not easy. And it's something that after a decently hard day in the break, someone like Wright or Moritz can get separation on. I think it creates a smaller group of 3 riders from the breakaway, or maybe even solo, and then they have a teammate marking behind. And I think, one of Wright or Moritz wins. I'd be inclined to go with Moritz, but I think Laporte will be in the break. Trentin will be in the break. Binny will be in the breakaway too, I hope.
Van der Poel wins tomorrow from the breakaway.
I mean, if he gets in the break, it'd be very difficult to beat, but he'll need a teammate.
Alpecin, don't you counter the fact that you don't believe you can control it by putting Van der Poel in the breakaway?
And Philipsen. Just put him in the break. Why not?
Every breakaway rider will be like, fuck you, Philipsen, why are you here?
He can win from this. So I think it's going to be a
funny.
Big rouleur break. Maybe even Poggy. Classics riders.
I'm going Van der Poel.
Okay, you got Van der Poel. I forgot who I picked. I picked a Bahraini. That's all from us today. Sprint stage, very hot conditions. We'll be back with maybe it's a sprint tomorrow. Bunch sprint. Anything else from you, Benji?
Yes, I want to announce that I'll be uploading a video on my channel in a few minutes, just after this podcast, where I won my first Zwift race, made a video about it. So if you want to check it out, it's on the Benji Naesen YouTube channel. Subtle plug at the end of this podcast.
All right, make sure you go and check that out and see Benji suffering on Zwift and getting the dub, unlike Philipsen today. Hope you enjoy the podcast as always. We'll see the recap of stage 18 tomorrow. 19. Ciao.